What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back, everyone. This is Lee, and yes, today we'll be talking about a Nikon Z-mount 50mm 1.8S lens versus the Nikon F-mount 50mm 1.8G lens. Now, for those people that have been shooting Nikon for this whole time on a DSLR, you guys know that this lens right here is basically the best budget-friendly portrait lens you could buy under 200 bucks. Now, when the Z-mount was released, we saw the 50mm 1.8 and we saw the hefty price tag at 600 USD, and many of us out there was like, yeah, that was a little expensive. That was expensive because if you bought the 50mm 1.8G, this was roughly around 200 USD versus the 600 USD from the Z-mount. Now, a lot of you guys are sitting back and thinking, is the price tag actually worth it on the Z-mount versus the G-mount? Now, that is something that we'll get into in this video, but right before we get into that, we'll talk about some of the specs in these lenses. Now, like I said before, the Z-mount is slightly more expensive. Well, it is way more expensive if you're just counting the lens, but if you're buying the 50mm F-mount with the FTZ adapter, it's gonna run you around 450 USD roughly, right? Now, in terms of heftiness, definitely this lens, surprisingly enough, with the adapter is still lighter than the 50mm Z-mount 1.8S. Now, that was quite interesting because this lens right here is pretty heavy actually. And to think about it, if you take a look at the elements in the Z-mount, you get roughly 12 elements. Yes, there's 12 elements in the Z-mount, whereas the F-mount, it's roughly around 7 elements. And also with the blades, the F-mount only has 7 blades, whereas the Z-mount has 9 blades. Now, with all that in mind, as you can already see just by reading the specs, I mean, this is a lot heavier, this has more elements, this has more blades, whereas this is more compact, less elements. I think this only has 1 spherical element, by the way, whereas this Z-mount has 2 spherical lens and 2 ED element and also 1 nano coating. Now, right before we dive into the side-by-side, let's take a quick listen to the autofocus motor because that's something that most people really want to know about the Z-mount versus an F-mount in general, right? So here we go. Now I'm just autofocusing on my camera right now. Let's try the F-mount. Now, as you notice, the F-mount will give you more noise when you are autofocusing. So if you are doing video and the mic is right here, you will probably pick up the autofocusing noise like that. And also, most of my tests are super simple. So if I do see a comma error over and over again, I will have to bring it up to you guys and let you guys know. Now, I also updated the brand new firmware for the Z50. And with that in mind, with the FTZ adapter, I noticed that the autofocus point is slightly off when you take a photo. Now, I'm on a tripod and I'm taking a picture of the subject right here. It misses slightly by a few millimeters and it's aiming at the wrong spot. I am aiming at the nose. Now, this picture right there, I'm outdoors, so I was thinking maybe the sun is, confusing the autofocus in some way or form with the FTZ adapter. That is what I thought in my head. Now, I took it home, I did an indoor test, and it also did the exact same thing. It was not hitting the nose where the dot is pointing at. It was hitting on top of the nose, which means that the autofocus on the FTZ adapter with the 50mm 1.8G lens, it's slightly off at 1.8. Now, with that in mind, I had to manual focus in my test to get the nose in focus. So just want to bring that up for you guys. Now, with all that in mind, let's take a look at the side-by-side comparisons. All right, so here's our first test. We are shooting outdoors on the landscape scene. On the left is the Z-mount and on the right is the F-mount. And I just want to mention that this is a clear sky day. This is a sunny clear sky day. So let's take a look. As you can see at the center of the image, the Z-mount is a lot sharper than the F-mount. If you take a look on the side of the image, the story remains the same. The Z-mount is a lot more sharper than the F-mount, even the background. Let's take a look at this electric pole right here. And yeah, it remains the same. Definitely the Z-mount is a lot sharper than the F mount. Let's take a look at the corners. It's blurry on the corners. And we take a look on the left side of things. Definitely the Z mount is still sharper than the F mount. So overall, we can definitely say that the Z mount at wide open and 1.8 is a lot better than the F mount. Now, I also want to mention about the sky. This is a clear sky day, so there's a huge sun up there somewhere. And as you can see that the F mount cannot handle that sun. So you see this overexposed sky, whereas the Z mount, you don't see that because the Z mount has this, the nano crystal coat. So just keep that in mind. The Z mount has that on its lens. So if you are shooting outdoors with this lens, you will probably get a much better result than using the F mount. So just want to keep that in mind. Let's take a look at 2.8. Here's 2.8. Everything remains the same. The Z mount is a lot sharper. I will have to mention that the F mount, the grass is a bit brighter. That's due to the lack of nano coat on the F mount. Still sharper on the Z mount. Let's take a look on the side. Z mount is still sharper. Take a look at the corners. Same on the side. As you can see at 2.8, the Z mount does way better than the F mount. F mount is still blurry pretty much. So let's take a look at F4. This is at F4. Let's take a look. So at F4, as you can see, story remains the same. The Z mount renders the image a lot sharper than the F mount. Take a look at the sides. Yep, the Z mount is a lot sharper than the F mount. Corners. It looks like the corners for the F mount, I don't think this is a big deal, but definitely the corners on the F mount right here looks a hair tad sharper, but I don't think that's a big deal. It's a corner, so most of this won't get cropped off anyway. So just want to bring that up. On the Z mount right here, it actually looks like the F mount is slightly catching up, but I'll have to give it to the Z mount. The Z mount is a lot clearer than the F mount. Let's take a look at 5.6. At 5.6, the center sharpness looks quite identical, but unfortunately the F mount does not have the nano crystal coat, so the grass is a lot brighter from the sun. So just want to bring that up. As you can see, even the corners right here, you can see a lot of the sun. So with the nano coat, it's a lot better. The background, the F mount is catching up, but definitely the Z mount is a lot sharper than the F mount at 5.6. But on the corners, the F mount is a lot sharper than the Z mount on the corners, if that's something that people are interested in. Looks kind of even there, and yeah, it looks pretty much getting identical on this side of things. I think it's just because there's no sun, as much sun on this side than this side maybe, because there's a sun that's coming from this direction, so that's why it's kind of blurry. But if you look at this side, it looks quite identical in my opinion. Maybe just a hair on the Z, but it's just pulling hairs at this point. But just want to bring that up. Now let's take a look at F8. Here is F8, and everything seems to look quite identical. I'll have to say that the grass is still slightly brighter than the Z mount. Let's take a look on the sides. Yeah, everything looks very identical, except the sky. Of course, the sky with no nano crystal coat, that's what you're gonna get. Let's take a look on the edges. Edges looks very similar to me. Let's take a look on the other side. Quite similar. So roughly around F8. If you minus the harsh sun, I think you'll just get a similar image. But since this is a summer day, you will get the sun regardless. So with that said, I would have to say that the Z mount is a lot better than the F mount so far. All right, so in our next scene, this is just a playground, and let's take a look at this image. Now as you can see, this is at 1.8. On the right is the F mount and on the left is the Z mount. And already right off the bat, you could see that chromatic aberration right there. Yeah, that is pretty rough. Let's take a look all around the image. You get more sharpness on the Z mount still. You get tons of chromatic aberration on the F mount. Let's take a look at this piece of sidewalk trim right there. Yep, you get chromatic aberration right there. As you can see, the playground area, it's a lot blurrier in the background, whereas the Z mount is a lot more clearer. And yeah, there you go. Definitely, I have to say that the Z mount is a lot sharper lens in this scene. Now, I want to show you guys something. This is chromatic aberration right there. This is a lens that's deflecting the chromatic aberration. You don't get chromatic aberration with the Z mount lens, and that's pretty impressive. So let me show you guys software removal with the chromatic aberration on the F mount. So let me show you guys. This is what it looks like. And let me go and turn off. Well, actually, let me go and pick that purple and remove it. It's gone, right? But if you take a look, that is what the computer is rendering. So let's compare the removal of the chromatic aberration with the Z mount without the removal. So let's take a look. Now, as you can see on the F mount, when you do removal for your chromatic aberration for any camera system, Canon, Pentax, Nikon, you lose the color when you do the chromatic aberration removal. So just be clear that you'll be missing some inconsistency in your color with the chromatic aberration removal. Let's take a look at the bottom. Yes, you are definitely removing most of the chromatic aberration, but as you can see for this example on top, you will be missing some of the colors. Just letting you guys know. So as you can see, this is like blue right there, and this goes like gray, black, or gray to blue. So just want to let you guys know, chromatic aberration removal is great until you actually take a look deeper versus a lens that don't have that issue. So with that said, if your lens do have chromatic aberration problems and you are software removing it, you might get some of this stuff. Let's take a look at 2.8. As you can see, there's definitely a lot of chromatic aberration happening on the F mount. Let's take a look. Definitely a lot more sharper on the Z mount than the F mount for this day. Look at the nano coating right there. You're missing a lot of details. Whereas the Z mount, you get all that detail. Let's go on the left side. And yeah, it seems to me that the Z mount can render the scene a lot more natural than the F mount. F mount is kind of slightly saturated. Actually, slightly less saturated because you take a look at the sliding board right here. Look at that blue versus this blue, right? So definitely the nano coat is helping that out. Let's take a look at F4. Still, it remains the same. F4, you still get slight chromatic aberration. Keep going, keep going. And on this side, it seems to be slightly even. Definitely the ground is a lot sharper on the Z mount than the F mount. And yeah, story remains the same. I'll have to give to the Z mount for F4. Now for 5.6, things starts to slightly even out. I'll have to say that the Z mount still retains most of the saturated colors, whereas the F mount it starts to lose that color due to the sun. So the floor right here is a lot more sharper on the Z mount than the F mount. And definitely the sliding board color is a lot more saturated on the Z mount than the F mount. And yeah, I have to say that Z mount is still a lot better image than the F mount overall. And here is F8. Now, as you can see, F8, the F mount still seems to be slightly, I guess, duller than the Z mount. The Z mount is still saturated, but they're very identical. And I'm pretty sure if you do some editing on the F mount file, you could definitely make it look identical to the Z mount. So yeah, look at the sides, look at the ground. The ground on the Z mount looks actually more sharper than the F mount. So that's something for you guys to know. But yeah, I think that the Z mount does a great job in this scene. So let's take a look at the next example. Now here is the Z mount versus the F mount. And already this is crazy because on this rooftop right here, this is just steel right there. So this is a very reflective surface and there's the sun right there. So let's take a look at 1.8. As you can see, look at that reflective surface. Look at the edges right there. Look at 1.8. This is crazy. There's no chromatic aberration on the Z mount. I mean, look at all the purple. It's all gone on the Z mount. It's not even there. Doesn't even exist. It's not even turning purple. The F mount is. You guys can take a look on the back side. You guys can take a look. As you can see, the background a lot more saturated on the Z mount than the F mount, and that's just because of the nano crystal coat. And yeah, that is pretty impressive on the Z mount. Here's 2.8. Story remains the same. I would have to give it to the Z mount. Look at that clearness right there. Purple color fringing right there. Look at that. Look at that on the F mount. I see that a lot on this lens. And I see this happen a lot on like other brands like the Pentax. Pentax have this purple thing going on in their lens. I don't know why they still have that, but this is something that Nikon seems to have fixed, and you don't need software. It's just straight out the camera. That's insane. I mean, take a look at the grass, right? The grass is a lot saturated than the F mount and a lot more sharper than the F mount. Here's F4. Even at F4, it's still purple on the F mount still. Very impressive on the Z mount. Let's take a look on the edges, on the floor. F mount is very blurry. Still the Z mount is a lot more clearer. And yeah, shooting directly in front of the sun, by the way. The sun is right there, right in front of the lens. This is 5.6. No chromatic aberration at all on the Z mount. Really, really impressive. Very impressive, Nikon. That is crazy. That is crazy good. Wow, look at that detail at 5.6. Look at that detail. It just, yeah. This lens can render anything that you put in front of it. Let me do F8. And as you can see, around F8, it looks slightly identical, but I have to give it to the Z mount. Z mount is still sharper. And look at the reflection. Look at that. That is crazy. Z mount can deflect all of that stuff right there. Yeah, that is amazing. And definitely look at the background. Wow, look at the Z mount. Renders everything at f8. All right, for this next test, we are shooting the subject in the middle. We are indoors, natural light. There's no sun involved. Actually, this natural light comes from the sun, but there's no real harsh sun in this scene. There's just natural light. And also, we're testing out the bokeh because the Z mount has 9 blades, whereas the F mount has 7 blades. So let's take a look. And keep in mind, I had to manual focus the F mount on the nose just because when I placed the target on the nose, it kept shooting. Let me show you guys again. It kept aiming right there. Yeah, the G mount kept hitting on top of the nose for some reason, where the target was on the nose. So just want to bring that up to those folks out there that missed that first part. Now, here is the Z mount versus the F mount. And you can already tell, wow, this is a lot sharper than the F mount for sure. The Z mount looks much sharper. Let's take a look at the bokeh in the back. To be really quite honest, if I have to really nitpick this, I have to say that the F mount bokeh, looks like cat's eye, kind of like oval, whereas the Z mount looks almost circular. So that's something that I notice. And the vignetting right there, I mean, vignetting for me is not a big deal. You could, you know, take it off, take it on. So, I mean, I think that the vignetting, they both have vignetting, that's for sure at 1.8. So, yeah. Here is 2.8. Already at 2.8, I have to give it to the Z mount. The Z mount is still a hair sharper than the F mount. Let's take a look at the bokeh. Bokeh looks identical still. Yeah, they look really identical. Now, that's surprising because this is 9 blades versus 7 blades. All right, this is F4. As you can see, without the harsh sun, indoor lighting, F4 definitely looks quite identical, to be quite honest. Maybe the Z mount might have a slight edge by a hair, but that's just, you know, 3 to 1 if you want to get that close to see that difference. But yeah, there you have it. Definitely indoor, natural light. They look quite identical around F4. So if you take this outdoors, it's not going to look the same. So just keep that in mind. The sun is going to really reveal which one is better, which one is worse. Let's go to 5.6. At 5.6, identical. Purely identical. Natural light, yeah. It seems like the F mount might be slightly sharper at 5.6 with natural light. This looks slightly blurry a little bit, but that's just nitpicking. But definitely the center sharpness, I would have to give it to, gosh, it looks very even, but you could, you know, pull hairs at that point. Let's take a look at the bokeh. Looks okay. I was going to say it looks even, but I'm just going to really like nitpick on this. You can see the slight geometry happening right there, but that's it. This is 1-to-1. No one will ever notice that from far away. So just letting you guys know that. And here is F8. It's all pretty identical at this point. Yep, very identical. I can't really tell the difference. And yeah, there you have it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this test. So just to wrap things up, is the Nikon 50mm 1.8s an excellent buy at 600 USD? I would have to say yes, remarkably yes. This lens is pretty good actually. I'm actually pretty surprised on this lens. I mean, this has great autofocus, great chromatic aberration control, wide open by the way, great video autofocus, and also edge to edge sharpness, wide open, sharp, center sharpness, sharp, wide open. That is crazy. With this, I mean, this couldn't even target a static subject on the nose with the firmware update. This is disappointing. I mean, this is the difference right here, guys. You're getting your eye shots of your subject. If you're aiming your subject on the eyes with this setup right here, you might be hitting the eyebrow. So that is the difference between getting shot and potentially not getting shot wide open. So with that in mind, if you are a true professional and you own a Z mount system, you should just buy this lens. You should, and you should already own this lens already. Now, if you're just starting out learning photography, this is probably a good setup for brand new Z mount owners. So this is still not a bad setup, but just remember, this might be, misfocusing at times. So just keep that in mind. But with all that said, I'm really surprised with this Z mount lens, to be quite honest. I didn't expect this to be that great. And with 12 elements in this lens, I understand why it's so good. So yeah, but anyways, thank you guys for checking me back. Hopefully you guys like this content. Definitely click like and subscribe. And don't forget to check out the merch store. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one, all right? Take it easy. Peace.